So yeah, again, we always have this 5 minutes. We're like 5 minutes ahead of schedule, as always. We now have awards from sponsor, but it is me who's going to talk about them. So the sponsor today, okay, then we have Julián Duque, right?
Duque.
Duque. Oh, sorry. Yeah, right. I actually, yeah, I double checked how your name is pronounced, but I always forget how the surname is. Okay.
It's always hard.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Okay. So then we have the Elastic Computer with Salesforce Functions, and after 1 hour we are closing this, but we can stay and chat a bit more if you guys like. And today's sponsor, as always, is FleetCore. Um, this is a large company, a client of Salesforce. They work on some payment stuff, and they always have a lot of career opportunities open. So at least Russian-speaking guys, you can go through a link on the event page and see if there's anything that you would like to to get on. And actually, that's it for me. So Julian, over to you.
Over to me, of course. So let me get this ready. Where are you, Zoom? Let me share my screen. Second desktop. You let me know if you are watching my screen right now.
Yeah, it's loading. Yeah, we can see it.
Awesome. If I look to the right, is because I have my cameras. You are in here on my right. Here I have my slides and everything. So okay. Hello, you all, and welcome to this session about Salesforce Functions. Today, we are going to be talking about elastic computing, what that is, and how elastic computing fits in the whole Salesforce development ecosystem. We will see how can we leverage the power of elastic computing and open languages to extend applications on the Salesforce platform. My name is Julián Duque. I am a lead developer advocate from the developer relations team at Salesforce, working mainly with Elastic Services and Heroku. So here are my contact information if you want to add me on Twitter or send me a message on my email after this session. If you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer those. So I guess you have attended at least one Salesforce presentation in the past. So this slide is going to be very familiar to you. The forward-looking statement, please, since Salesforce is a public traded company, don't make any financial decisions after what I'm going to be telling you today. I am not a financial advisor, and some of the things I might be mentioning are not public yet. Even though Salesforce Functions is GA, I might be mentioning certain things that are coming into the future, so don't make any decisions based on what I'm going to be telling you today, okay? Let's take a look at the agenda for this presentation. I'm going to be talking about Salesforce Functions, what that is, how it fits into this cloud computing ecosystem. I will tell you how to get started with Salesforce Functions today, an overview of the Salesforce SDK and how can you interact with Salesforce data from a function. I will show you a demo or 2 or 3. We have plenty of time, so why not? And at the end, some Q&A to answer all of your questions regarding functions. Sounds good? Sounds good. Okay.
In question
Yes.
and answer. In question and answer, is there any voucher or any swag is available?
From me, I don't think so. From the sponsors or organizers, do you have anything to give?
Yeah, we have some vouchers.
Awesome. Because I don't have anything that I can give you from here. I might have some things, but not sure how to ship those to Moscow, sadly. But we will figure it out in the future when we have like another opportunity for me to join you. So continuing with functions, let's see where functions fit into this whole cloud computing buzzword and glossary. So we have a bunch of different acronyms in cloud computing. So I'm going to be starting describing those and see where functions fit. We have IaaS, or infrastructure as a service, which is the bare bones of cloud computing. Pretty much is where you can start like creating servers, defining network configuration, specifying the type of databases, operating systems, and all the pretty much backbones of your cloud applications. Some of the products and services that offer these infrastructure as a service are known, maybe you have used AWS or Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure. So the main message here is that you will need to make a lot of decisions and invest a lot of time and resources on operating a cloud application that is running on an infrastructure as a service. You will need to choose the operating system, the type of virtual machine, the network topology, the API gateway, routing, etc. But we have abstractions on top of an infrastructure as a service. We have platform as a service, or PaaS. And here we have a more opinionated version where you can deploy application using developer tools, and the platform is going to make some decisions for you. So you are not going to be investing a bunch of times and resources on the operations. You are going to be investing time and resources building the application and just deploying the application that is going to be running on this platform. Here we have services like Heroku, which is part of Salesforce, or the Salesforce platform, which is a platform as a service. Remember that you can build applications and deploy those applications on the Salesforce platforms, or other services like Netlify or Vercel, where you can build single pay applications, JavaScript applications that are going to run on the cloud as well. You have developer tools that simplify the process of deploying and putting an application on the cloud. Then we have another abstraction, and this fits more into the serverless architecture. So serverless means that pretty much you don't need to worry about the operations. The whole operations side of the equation is managed by the provider. You just focus on using developer tools and some mechanisms to create an application, and that's it. You don't need to worry about configuration and defining the other aspects of the cloud. So we have backend as a service, or BaaS, which are services that lets you define objects, and after you define those objects or a schema, it will automatically generate an API for you to interact with those objects. So here you can find services like AWS Amplify or Firebase by Google. Pretty much you create some objects like users or products, and after that you have a REST API or a service-oriented API or a real-time API to interact with that application. The one we are interested today is functions as a service, or FaaS, which is also part of the serverless architecture. So again, you don't need to worry about the operations. You don't need to worry about configuration. You don't need to make any decisions about that. Functions as a service lets you specify backend code. This time you are going to write code or write backend logic that is going to be deployed to these functions as a service environment. Usually, these functions as a service environment is elastic. And remember that I mentioned initially that we are going to be talking about elastic computing and what elastic means. Elastic means that depending of the needs of my application, the service is going to scale or downscale automatically. So if right now I have one user requesting resources from this function or from this service, I'm going to be offering certain computing capabilities. If the next minute I have 1,000 or 1,000,000 users, I'm going to be scaling automatically and serving those users. And if after 10 minutes I go back to one user, I'm going to be downscaling back to the minimum amount of computing resources that I need to serve that specific user. So in difference of infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, we are not planning scalability here. We don't need to measure the amount of memory and CPU or the amount of virtual machines that we need to serve that amount of traffic. We are letting the system grow and shrink depending of the needs of my application. And why this is important? Because it is going to be cost effective. So you are not going to be paying more than what you need. You are paying exactly the usage of your application. And this is why functions is a very important part of cloud computing due to this elastic nature. So we are going to be focusing here. Some of the functions as a service products that you can find on the market are AWS Lambda, Google Cloud Run, Azure Functions, or Salesforce Functions, which is the one I'm going to be talking about today. And then we have the most abstracted of all, which is software as a service, and it's a complete whole product that you can use, that it's completely running on the cloud. And here you have like Salesforce as a whole product, Google Cloud, or Google Drive, or Office 365, etc. This is just a full application that you can run from your browser. But what is a function? So a function, if we talk exactly from a programming language terminology, a function is just it's just a method that receives an input, perform some operations, and returns an output. That's it. That's pretty much a function. In terms of a cloud computing function, it is going to be exactly that, a single purpose, because usually a function just do one operation. It is on demand, as I mentioned, depending of who needs to execute that function is going to be executed or not. So it is not going to be constantly running. Short-lived, something is going to be triggering the function performs the operation, returns the value, and that's it. The function just finalizes and it stops working. And it's a microservice without complex infrastructure. So microservice is because it is something that is running on a serverless architecture. It is single purpose, and without complex infrastructure, you don't need to worry about configuration or operation or the memory or CPU or network topology or routing, anything like that. A function, it's something that it's going to be triggered by an event or by an HTTP request. It's going to perform an operation and it will return a value to you. So let's talk about Salesforce Functions. So Salesforce Functions allow you deliver event-driven connected experiences fast. So pretty much you can scale elastically on trusted infrastructure. So this is one of the main important aspects of functions, is that the functions are going to be running elastically, as I mentioned before, are going to scale and reduce the capability depending on the needs of your application, and they are running on trusted infrastructure. Functions are running on platform, and they are running on the Salesforce trusted boundary. So when you are running the function or when you are executing the function, you have access to your Salesforce org data, which is already pre-authenticated to you. You don't need to set up any authentication tokens or mechanisms. The function already has access to your org. You can innovate with flexibility. You have access to open languages to build on platform. Normally, when you are extending or creating an application on platform, you use Apex, and you know that Apex is a powerful language, but you have certain limitations. And also developing on platform, you have these governor limits, which sometimes they are not going to let you go and perform certain type of operations. With functions, you can use other languages like JavaScript and TypeScript using the Node.js runtime or Java to build applications. And this means that not only you can use the language, but also the whole language ecosystem. For example, in Node.js and in Node.js, using JavaScript or TypeScript, you can access to any library on NPM. And with Java, you can access to any library that it's available on the Maven ecosystem. So this is giving you a lot of flexibility and capabilities to build applications relying on a lot of different open source libraries that are available on the community. So if you need to create, for example, a PDF, you don't need to pay for pretty much a product that generates PDF for you. There is an open source library for that. Or if you need to create a QR code or perform image manipulation or do some CSV or advanced XML parsing, there are a bunch of different operations that already have libraries on both the NPM and the Maven ecosystems. And also you will be able to deliver connected digital experience because functions can be triggered from Apex, and this means you can attach a function pretty much on a flow, on a Lightning Web component, or on other parts of your application. So a function can be triggered from a platform events. As of today, everything is going to be done through Apex, but we are working, and this is forward-looking, we are working on the possibility to trigger functions directly from LWC, directly from Flow, or directly from a platform event, etc. Today, you do that directly from Apex. So you can extend the Salesforce platform with Salesforce Functions. Again, you can elastic scale your applications. You are staying on platform because this is running on the platform that you already have and it's already pre-configured. You don't need to set up anything. And one of the things that I like the most is that you have access to an expanded talent pool. Normally, companies struggle a lot by hiring Salesforce professionals. There are not a lot of Apex developers out there. They are expensive, and people that want to get into Apex development, they need to have a bunch of training, and it is difficult for companies to start bringing talent. Or when there are like different teams on a big company, it's difficult to collaborate because obviously there is a gap in the knowledge there. With functions, you can easily bring people that already know Java or JavaScript into building Salesforce applications or extending Salesforce applications without going through the whole route of learning everything about the Salesforce platform. So this is a good opportunity for people outside the Salesforce ecosystem to start learning about Salesforce, and also a great opportunity for Salesforce developers like you to start getting new skills to learn Node.js and Java to extend your application. So it's going to be a win-win on both sides. Where functions are going to be pretty much usable, or where does it make sense to use functions? For example, for complex business calculations, if you need to build like certain features that are very complex, that consume a lot of CPU or memory resources, you might want to bring that computing to a function. Loan processing, product license keys, bill of materials, etc. Those type of operations can be done on a function. To create batch processes or connect to external data sources as well, that's something that can be done on a function. To create resource-intensive back office operations like document generation, mail merge, creating invoices, generating QR codes, everything else can be also done on a function, and keeping the logic that can be run within a transaction in Apex and the other operations on functions. So what can functions do for you? It can push past org limits. Remember, I mentioned we have the governor limits, and there are like certain operations we cannot do today. For the rest of those operations, you can rely on functions. You are staying on platform. You are not taking your data out of Salesforce, going through a different cloud vendor. You are staying on platform with your information. You can leverage the broader talent pool, as I mentioned before. You are bringing more talent into the Salesforce ecosystem. This is something very good, which is the speed to value. You are iterating faster and creating solutions faster. And we have a very good use case while we were doing the pilot. We had one customer trying functions. They wanted to do or to implement a specific use case using AI and machine learning. And they were able to do a basic proof of concept in one day just by using JavaScript on the Node.js ecosystem, because there were already libraries for that, and the developer were already familiar with these technologies. So he was able to put a very fast proof of concept, integrated that proof of concept with Salesforce, and they didn't even know about Salesforce. They had already access to JavaScript and that information. It was very easy for them to create a solution in one day, pretty much. And you can optimize spend with demand, because you are not spending a lot of money on resources. It depends of the demand of your application. And even though I don't sell and I don't know much about like the pricing model, etc., at the Q&A, we can like briefly discuss how the pricing model works for this product. How to identify functions opportunities, how to see if we need functions in our application. So this is a flow chart we can use. So do we need more platform compute or use industry languages to create our solution? Yes, okay, go and do that on functions. If we don't need more platform compute, or if we don't need industry languages, there is another question for us. Are we reaching the apex limits, or are we pushing the apex limits? Do we need to go further than the governor limit? If yes, there is another question. Is our logic, or our logic needs to run within the apex transaction? If it needs to run within the apex transaction, we are sticking with apex. Apex is the way to go. If not, if we don't depend on the apex transaction, we can go on functions. a function is going to be asynchronous in nature. So we can send the event or trigger the function and wait for the result. So we are going to let the function do the work. Everything else, Apex is going to be the way to go. This means that with functions, we are not planning to replace Apex. And that's something that a lot of people was concerned about. Apex is still the de facto language for Salesforce, and the Apex team is still working and adding a lot of innovation into Apex. Functions is an added value. It's a way to extend applications on the Salesforce platform using open industry languages. We are also even working on adding a fourth language support, which is going to be Python. It's on the roadmap. So it is a way to bring other languages and other talent into Salesforce, but we are not aiming to replace Apex. Apex still is the main and default language for a Salesforce platform. So now, how can I get started with functions today? First, you can get started with the local development experience. With the local developer experience, you can access data from your org, you can invoke functions from the CLI, and you can start writing functions today without having a functions license, without spending money. You can use your developer org to use functions today. The only thing you cannot do is deploy a function to a compute environment. A compute environment is where you deploy functions on Salesforce so they can be triggered by Apex. So while using the local development experience, you cannot trigger a function from Apex, but you can trigger the function from the Salesforce CLI. You can get the result, and you can interact with the Salesforce org using the Salesforce Sdk already included in a function. So you can build your whole solution, and once it's ready, you can go to the second step. The second step is like you can go and get access to the trial org. Right now, we have a limited trial. You can get access to a functions enabled org that it will be available for 30 days. And after you get the trial, you have access to this org that already has functions, and you can deploy your applications to the compute environment and trigger the functions from Apex. And 3, you can enable functions in your production org. For this, you will need to have a license. So you can get the license by contacting your AE, going through the whole purchase process that I don't know how that works, or asking for a courtesy license if your company want to try functions or a specific solution you are building. The best way to start learning about functions is using the functions recipe sample app. This is something we built at the developer relations team. It is a Salesforce application that shows you how to write functions and how to integrate functions with Lightning Web Components, Flow, Apex, etc. This is available on GitHub. You can go to the Trailhead Apps GitHub repository. The project is called Functions Recipes. You can clone it, run the functions locally. If you have access to the trial already comes with this application, so you don't need to deploy it to the trial. Go and give it a try and have access to the source code and learn about functions today. And I will be showing you in the demo how the functions recipes application looks like and how can you start like interacting with it. Now let's get into the code. How a function looks like. So we have 2 main languages. One is going to be JavaScript and TypeScript. They are going to be look pretty much similar, and Java. So what's the anatomy of a function in JavaScript? So each JavaScript function is going to export an asynchronous function that contains 3 input parameters. The first one is the event. The event contains the payload or the input information that is being sent to the function. The context contains the user and the org information of the function. So this is the one that has access to the authenticated org and the Salesforce SDK. And third is going to be the logger. Is the object that you will use to log information to the console or to the Salesforce compute environment when you deploy the function. In Java, it's pretty similar. We have a class that implements a Salesforce function interface. The Salesforce function interface have two specific type of objects that you define depending on your needs. One is the input and the other one is the output. The input, it's a plain old Java object that it's going to specify the shape of the input information of your function. And the output, it's going to be a plain old Java object that is going to specify the shape of the output of your function. Since Java is a typed programming languages, you need to specify these two. Automatically, Java is going to be taking care of the serialization. So the input is JSON and the output is going to be JSON as well. The same with JavaScript. JavaScript is dynamic, so you don't need to worry about types here if you are not using TypeScript. If you are using TypeScript, you will need to specify the type of the input and the output as well. And pretty much you perform an operation and you return the value. And the same thing happens in Java. We have the apply function, and the apply function or method performs an operation and returns a function output instance. The main difference between Java and JavaScript is that Java only has two input parameters. One is the event, which has the input information, and the context, which is exactly the same as JavaScript. It contains the user information, the authenticated org, and the Salesforce SDK. The logger in JavaScript, it's using a Log4j instance, not Log4j. So we are not using Log4j, so we are not vulnerable to the latest and greatest security bug that happened in the Java ecosystem. We use another alternative, which is SL4J for doing logger. So if you are a Java developer, you already know how to do logging using these libraries. How can you invoke a function? Remember, when to invoke a function from Apex, you will need to deploy a function. So this means you will need to have a Salesforce enable, a functions enable Salesforce org or a functions license. So how you do that? You can do it two ways. One is the synchronous way and the other one is the asynchronous way. Synchronously, you will need to get a reference of the function using the functions namespace. You get a reference of the function class by using the get static method, and you pass a function name. The function name is composed by the project name and the function ID. And I will be showing you this later when I show the full project. I have the functions recipes project, so I can show you how this looks like. Then I need to create an instance of an invocation. So here is where I'm going to be invoking the function. So I have a function invocation object. I'm going to be invoking the function with a payload. Here the payload is a JSON string. So I'm passing a string serialized in JSON with the input information. And then I can get the response. And this is also a JSON string. So I'm getting the response from the function. There is also error handling implemented. I'm going to be showing how to do error handling later in the functions recipes example. You can also invoke a function as asynchronously. This is very useful, for example, if you are invoking a function from a trigger. or from a platform event. So what you will need to do is you will need to implement a callback using the function callback interface to handle the response. And the handle response method is going to get a function invocation, and here is where you do the operation after you get the response. How to invoke the function? The same. You get a function instance using function get, and then you create a function invocation by invoking the function with a payload and passing the callback as a second parameter for the function. Now, let's take a look at the Salesforce SDK that it's included with a function. I'm going to be showing you the Node.js SDK, but if you want to have access to the Java SDK, there are the functions documentation where you can have access to the different classes and methods that are available. But they are going to be pretty similar. Pretty much it's a parallel of those two. So the Salesforce SDK is how you interact with Salesforce. It is the gateway to your Salesforce data and org information through a number of interfaces. So this is like a hierarchy way of how can you see these objects from the context. So you have the context input parameter that it's available on all of the functions. There you have access to the user information and to the org information. And through the org information, you have access to the data API. And the data API is the SDK. Also, part of the data API is the unit of work. And the unit of work is a pattern to work with transactional operations that are going to be sent to Salesforce. I'm going to be showing you an example in a moment. So let's take a look at the org interface. The org interface is the one that contains the information about your org. So here you can access to the org ID, the API version you are using, and the base URL and domain URL of your org while triggering this specific function. Let's take a look at the user interface. Here you can get the user ID that is invoking the function. You can get the user username, etc. Let's take a look at the data API. With the data API, you will be able to perform queries to your Salesforce org. Here I am doing a join query between accounts and contacts and returning that information. Why I need to do a query from a function? Maybe this doesn't make any sense because I can do a query directly from Apex. Maybe I will need information and perform some other operations in a function, but this is not the best use case. I mean, why I should be like getting information and returning the information back to Apex. But this is just for demo purposes, showing you that you can perform queries from a function, and then you can do whatever you want to do with that information within your function. And also you can perform CRUD operations. You can create, update, and delete data from a function. Here I'm showing you how can you create an account. So you use the create method, specify that this is of type account. You can use any Salesforce object here, and then you pass an object with the fields you are going to add to that specific object. And now let me show you the unit of work. So with the unit of work, I can pretty much have multiple operations and have relationships between those operations, and at the end commit all of those operations as a single transaction. If any of those steps work, the transaction is going to be rolled back. Internally, this is using the Composite Graph API. So if you are familiar with the Composite Graph API, this is just an interface on top of that, and it's going to be more easy to use. So here I am creating a new unit of work with that unit of work, I'm going to be registering operations. So here I am registering a create, and I'm getting a reference ID. With this reference ID, I will be able to register more creations and create relationships between those objects. So first I created a contact, then first I created an account, then I'm creating a contact and doing a relationship. And now I am creating a case and doing a relationship between an account and a contact on that case. And then I am committing that unit of work, and the whole operation is going to be sent to Salesforce. Before going to the Q&A, I'm seeing that I have some questions on the chat. I think I have not checked the chat. I'm going to be showing you the functions recipes application. So this is what you are going to get after signing up to the trial. How to signing up to the trial? You are going to functions.salesforce.com. You will have this beautiful form here. Go ahead, fill out the information, and it will send you an invitation to a functions enabled org. Remember that you have 30 days. So my honest recommendation is, if you want to build a proof of concept, get familiar to the local development experience. And when you are familiar with the local development experience, go ahead and request the trial so you can deploy your application. I will be showing you a live demo how to start building using the local development experience. But first, let's explore the functions recipes app. So when you get the org, immediately you are going to see this, which is the functions recipes application. Here you have access to all of the different recipes that we have created. So here we have a full example of how to process a large JSON payload, calculate some information, and then return some values. So we have this example using JavaScript, and we also have this example using Java. So here you can see how to solve the same issue using both languages, so you can have an idea. From here, you will be able also to trigger functions. For example, the org info function that returns the org information. This is written using TypeScript. As you can see here from the source code, I'm using TypeScript, and I am returning an org info object. I can go ahead and click on run function, and it will return the information from that function that it's already deployed. And you can click to view source, and it will take you to GitHub, where this full function lives. So here you can take a look at the whole project on GitHub as well. And there is more functions that you can take a look at. For example, the unit of work. In Java, it's a more complex example that you can run also from here. We also have some implementation examples. On this tab, you get the implementation examples. Is how can you integrate those functions with Lightning Web Components or a flow? Here I'm using the process large database function, which uses the code.org schools database, which is a large database of different code schools for teenagers and children. And I am going through the whole list and filtering the list depending on my location. So here I'm going to ask for the 15 closest schools to my location. I will invoke the function. It will send the payload to the function, which is my current location, and 15, which is the number of schools that I want, and it will return a list. What I'm doing is just using a Lightning Web Component map and printing out all the different schools here on the map. So as you can see, I leave nearby this forest. And my closest school is going to be the Paul R. Wharton High School. I integrated that also on a flow. I don't know any latitude and longitude by memory. So let's say I have 72 and 34. Maybe this is Colombia. Coder Dojo in Eastern Cape. This is South Africa, maybe. I don't know, but I have an information, and this is flow. Again, I'm able to integrate a function, both Lightning Web Components and flow. Let's take a look at the source code. So I have the functions recipes project here. Basically, this is a Salesforce project, a Salesforce DX project, the one that you are already familiar with. The only difference is that it has a functions folder where you can see all the different functions that we have written. For example, the process large JS function, which is this one. It is a Node.js project. It has the index.js with the source code where I am reading the school data. I am getting the payload information, which is the latitude, the longitude, and the length of the data that I'm going to be filtering. Then I am going through the whole data and filtering by distance, and I'm returning the information as well. I have the project.toml, which is the one that describes my function. And here I have the ID. So this is important. This is the ID that represents the function in the compute environment. And the SFDX project has a name, which is functions recipes. So the full function ID is going to be a combination of the project name and the function ID. So that's how can I trigger the function from Apex. So now let's go to Apex, go to classes. I have the invoke process large data function. And here you can see that I am getting that large data value function using the functions recipes dot process large data JS function. I am invoking the function with the payload that I am providing to this method. And then I am checking if the status is error, I am returning an error. If not, I am getting a response. And this is just a basic JSON response. I also have that function from a flow. Here I show you how can you also serialize and deserialize that information into an object. So you can use Apex classes to get that information and embed those into a flow interface. And we also have the generic function invoker for the rest of the functions, so you can get the input from the interface. And here you have access to all the Lightning Web components that we use for the implementation. So go ahead, functions recipes is a very good project to learn about functions. Second, I wanted to show you how to start from scratch. So how to start functions from scratch. So first, you will need to have either Java or Node.js installed in your computer, depending on the language of your choice. You will need to have SFDX and the SF command. So I have SFDX and I have SF. SF is the new or the unified CLI from Salesforce. Is a new project that we have to have all of the different Salesforce CLI under one command. And functions is the first experience that was released on this new unified CLI. And for now, we need to have Docker in our computer. Docker will be removed or replaced next month in January, and you will not need Docker locally. But as of today, you will need to have Docker to run the functions locally. So how can we start? Here I'm from a project. I am from a basic empty folder. I'm going to be creating a new project. So let's run sf generate project and give it a name, Moscow Functions. So I'm generating a new project. Awesome, I have a new project. Let's go to that folder, Moscow Functions. Now let's generate a new function. SF generate function, give it a name, hello Moscow, and give it a language. Let's do JavaScript. So I'm generating a new function. Now it created a function on my computer. Now I can go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. Here I have the functions folder open. I have the index.js. Perfect. This is doing a query against the authenticated org that I have in here. You can use a developer edition org, or you can use a production enabled org, whatever works. So make sure to log into an org. So I'm going to be doing a login to an org. So let's log into a Salesforce org. Which one? Which one? I have a bunch. Let's use the functions that I have. Let me get the password from somewhere because I forgot the password. Okay, I'm going to be using the trial one, but you can use your developer edition org. So let me log into the trial one and see if it works. I'm logging in. Perfect. Set an alias for the org. Functions trial. This is my target dev hub. I am logged in. Awesome. SF emb list. I am listing out my environments. Perfect. I have the functions trial in there. Beautiful, beautiful. Now let's change my function. Let's query from an account. No, let's don't do that. Let's return a hello world. Message. Hello Moscow from a function. Awesome. And let's start this function. I can start this function from Visual Studio Code using sfdx start function, or I can do it from the terminal by going to the functions folder, the function code, and doing sf run function start. And let's hope I don't have any function running, otherwise I will get an error. I don't think I have anything running in here. Let me check with Docker PS. No, I don't have anything running. So with sf run function start, this will start building out the function and putting the function into the container environment locally. And now after I run the function, I will be able to trigger it and send a payload and return that message. So this will take some time. I'm going to be checking the chat for questions. So Patricia says, hello, everyone. Hello, Patricia. Kuldeep, hello. Hi from Jaipur, India. Hello. That's great that you are from that far. Let's say, Nikita, it is possible to launch other JVM languages code as a function, for example, Kotlin or Clojure. Officially supported, no, but I have seen functions running on Kotlin. So from the CLI, the project is going to be a Java project. But if you are able to hack through it and create a Kotlin project and build it with Maven or the tooling, I think you will be able to do it. I might need to ask the Java language owner because he has functions running on Kotlin, but officially they are not supported. Also, it is possible to use TypeScript instead of JS. Yes, and that's officially supported. You can write functions in TypeScript. I can show you right now while this loads, how can you do a TypeScript function. So you can create a function from Visual Studio Code or from the CLI. This is hello TS function. This is a name. And I'm going to be selecting TypeScript. Now the project is using TypeScript. And I can easily go ahead and specify a type. This is going to be my school, for example, type. And this is a name. And I can change the invocation event to be of type school. And now I am specifying the input school if I want to store a school by name, for example. And this is the payload that I'm expecting on this specific example. So yes, you can use TypeScript. But the other one, you will need to hack through it. Okay, the function is running, hello Moscow. It is running on port 8080, so it is a local web application. And you can also debug and access using Visual Studio Code, the debugging experience. Let me trigger the function. To trigger the function, you are going to use sf run function. Then you pass the URL of the function, which is locally running on port 8080. And then you pass a payload. And you always need to pass a payload, even though the payload is empty. So here I am passing an empty JSON. I'm executing the function. And I should get a response, which is hello Moscow from a function. So the function was executed. I have a warning. I don't have a connected org because I am not logged in from a specific org. Let me go to the functions trial org here real quick to see if now I can get the org. Now I am using the functions recipes org, so I will be able to get information from the org and do queries and store information. So locally, you can connect to an org, even though this org is not going to be a functions-enabled organization. And if you can see from the terminal, I am getting the log information. I am invoking hello Moscow with that empty payload. You can also create an empty or JSON file, create a JSON payload, and click on the invoke button in here. This is going to be invoking the function with this specific payload. You can see it's returning the same value, hello Moscow, but now the logger is being executed with the payload I specify in that JSON file. If you go to the functions recipes project, for example, the large data.js, on the data folder, you can see sample payloads, so you can trigger those functions with those sample payloads. And if you go to the main folder of each function, you have instructions of how to run the function locally. So this is a great way also to start with the local development experience. Another question, it is possible to try this out in a dev org? Yes, today it is possible locally. Not deploy to a dev org locally. In the future, I cannot promise anything, but our team is working to have some sort of way of supporting functions in developer orgs. But this is forward-looking, and this is nothing that we have agreed or put a date on it, but that's something that we want to have. Today, you can request a trial org going to functions.salesforce.com, and now you will be able to deploy to that org. Are there any plans to enable packaging for functions? As far as I know, they are not available for packaging at the moment. You are right. They are not available for packaging at the moment, but it is on the roadmap, and our team is prioritizing that because it's one of the most requested features. Are you using NeoVim? High five, man. I am not using NeoVim. I am using Visual Studio Code with Vim support. But locally, sometimes I use Vim. Okay, so currently you run a function locally in a Docker container. Could you share how are you going to run it after January? Okay, after January, I don't think I have access to that command now because I have not updated to the latest SF, but it will be SF run function start local, and that will run without Docker. Let's see if this works without Docker right now. Not sure if local it's available. I have not tried this, so this is live. If this works, cool. If it doesn't work, sorry, I have not tried this before. But it is good that you ask. I like to be challenged live. So I can be proved wrong or I can be surprised. So I know we will be supporting Docker-less or container-less local functions. That's something we are aiming to have because, as you know, Docker Desktop ends support for enterprises on January 31st. So we want to give the opportunity to enterprises to run functions locally without paying for Docker. So this is our priority. Right now, I've heard that it should be by running SF run function start local, but in the future, it will be, that option is going to be the default. So let's see. Not sure if it's going to work. So, and I'm still doubting if this is going to work because I have not updated the CLI. More comments and questions. Love the new CLI. Are there any SH completions already? I don't know. I use Bash and it doesn't have completions yet. Oh, look at that. It is working locally without Docker. So yes, it works locally without Docker by appending the local at the end. So let me confirm. Docker PS. I don't have any Docker container running. And let me see if I can trigger the function. I can trigger the function. So cool. Nikita, thank you very much for asking. I just learned that now we support Dockerless or containerless local development experience by appending the local at the end of the SF run function start command. PB Molchanov, how do functions let us go beyond Salesforce limits? Okay, that's a very good question. And the answer is on the docs. So there is the Salesforce Functions docs. You can go to get started. And on the developer guide, there is the limits. Oh, no. Where is the limits? Get started, quick start. No, where is the limits? I have a link that talk about the limits, and it should be linked, but I'm not finding that. Okay. I remember being a link here. I might need to spend some time. Okay, understanding function limits. They changed the link. Okay, this is where they explain all of the different limits that exist on functions. But basically, functions run outside of your org limits, and it has a specific bucket for API calls. So it is not the same bucket that your organization uses. It has a different specific bucket for those API calls. So if you want to learn more about the limits, go ahead to this page. And also, this is not your typical multi-tenant environment. Every function is running on a compute elastic environment, as I mentioned at the beginning. So it runs on a container environment with its own resources. So it is not sharing instances in the multi-tenant environment. So the limits are being managed differently than the limits of a Salesforce org. Perfect. Let me continue with the list. Kuldeep, I am marketing cloud consultant and I need to make HTTP call out from Salesforce functions and also download data from my Pardot. Is this possible? If yes, then how? Kuldeep, are you the same that is asking me the question on Stack Exchange and the Trailblazer community group? If so, let me tell you that yes, you can. You can do any external third-party callout from a function to either Salesforce APIs or on any other external service. There is no limitation about that. What is exactly your problem? Tell us.
Yes, I'm the same, and I'm the same person, and I need to save these files in the CSV format in my Pardot. Yeah.
Okay, so, cool. So yes, you can. If you go to the functions recipes project, there is a work in progress pull request that I have in here. Work in progress, add Salesforce API bulk API recipe. So you can go ahead in there, take a look at the code. I have a very good example, which is the Salesforce API bulk version 2 ingest.js. This file have examples how to process a CSV file and how to do external callouts. Here I am calling a Heroku service and I am calling a Salesforce API, which is the bulk API, but you can change it to do it into Pardot. There are like certain things that you need to keep into account. First, the files needs to be processed in memory and stored in Pardot. You cannot store files in a function because the functions are transient. Function runs, and when it returns the value, the function disappears and you lost pretty much the state. Functions are stateless, so you cannot store files inside the function container, but you can process the CSV, get that file temporarily on the file system, and then send that file into Pardot. Because I don't know, this is something that I don't know, if Pardot uses a different access token than Salesforce, you will need to provide that access token to the Pardot API. If it is the same, you can reuse the one that we provide here. This is pretty much a Salesforce API token, but if it is different, you will need to provide a different one. And to provide a different one, I will recommend you to take a look at the environment recipe where we show you how to specify environment variables into a function. So that way you will be able to provide an API key for the function when you are running this. This works both locally on or while you are deploying a function as well. So take a look at that and take a look how can you provide environment variables into a function.
Yes, great.
And here I have examples how can you do those external callouts. So as you can see, I'm doing it to an external site on Heroku, and I'm doing to an external or internal API through Salesforce. So yes, it is totally possible.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You are welcome, and feel free to mark the answer on Stack Exchange as answer if you want. But feel free to reach me out on the Trailblazer community group or Twitter or email if you have more questions. Nikita, TypeScript, perfect, awesome, yes. And we are working, as I told you before, on Python support, and more other languages might come in the future. We don't know yet. Please give us feedback. Tell us what language do you use, what language do you want to see implemented in Salesforce Functions, and I will be able to pass this message back to product team to see if there is going to be interest on doing an official support. Taras ask, are there any peculiarities for working with the specific clouds, for example, Marketing Cloud, which was not originally? So as of today, you can trigger a function from Apex. So anything that can trigger an Apex class can interact with a function. In the future, we want to have functions being able to be triggered by any other clouds. So I know there are like some work being done from Experience Cloud, and there are like interest to integrate functions in other clouds as well. But as of today, functions are triggered from Apex. So if any other class, a cloud, can trigger an Apex class, you can integrate with functions. But sure, in the roadmap and in the future, we will be more available to the other clouds. Nikita, NeoVim under the hood of VS Code works perfectly, much better than Beam emulation in VS Code. Ah, awesome. I don't even know which one I have. I might take a look at the NeoVim one. Yeah, I have the Beam emulation. So let me take a look at the NeoVim because I've been a Beam user for a while. So I guess it's this one with a bunch of stars. Okay, cool. I will be taking a look at this. Thank you, Nikita, for your recommendation. Works locally without Docker. It is a miracle. Yes, a holiday miracle just happened in front of our eyes. Okay, can we use Java libraries in Salesforce Functions? Yes, and I have an example for you. So let me share this in the chat. This is Heroku examples, route planner SFX. This is another local demo that I built, or that I not built from scratch. I just adapted to functions using platform events and Java, not Node.js, Java. So here, if you go to functions route planner, I am using a Java function that solves the, like, pretty much uses the travel salesman problem to solve a delivery use case. So I am using an external library called GraphHopper.jspread to be able to solve that problem. And you can see the whole implementation, how I'm integrating Salesforce and that library to pretty much choose the best route within different certain waypoints. And it's giving me a delivery plan. How can I do that? Every Java function is just a Java project with Maven, so I have access to my POM XML file, and here I can specify my libraries. So here I have SLF4J, Mockito for testing, Hamcrest to do mocking, the Grasshopper, JSpread, etc. You can use whatever you want. And if you go, for example, to functions recipes, I have the process large data Java here. Process large data function. I am using JSON from Google to read and process a JSON file. And what I did was pretty much adding JSON to my POML. And that's it. You can use any Java library in a Java function. Let's continue. Haskell for functions. You are ambitious. You are ambitious. Seriously, Clojure will be really nice. I love this language and functional paradigm seem to be perfectly matched. So let me see Malax. He is the Java language owner for Salesforce and Heroku. Ask him. Go ahead and tweet at him. I know he has Kotlin examples. And we at Heroku support Clojure. We support Scala as well. And since functions relies on build packs, I know it is possible, but I am not exactly sure if we officially support those. But hacking through it, there might be a possibility. So go ahead and ask him, and he will be able to give you a proper answer. Okay. Can I use Gradle instead of Maven? I guess you can. Ask him as well. He will be able to give you a better answer. At the end, it is a Java project. And the project is being built on the cloud, or it's being built on that container. So it depends of how that building process works. But it's going to be good to ask him for those specific questions, because he's the one that has like the domain expertise on Java. It is necessary to buy some extra license to use functions in my org. Yes, Pavel. So functions is a paid feature. You will need to pay for it if you want to use them on your org. It is you pay by the license, and the license includes 1 million invocations a month. And each invocation, it's a gigabyte of resources in CPU and memory. And that's pretty much how it's being charged. After you consume that 1 million invocations, you pay like a very small fraction per 1 million invocations. So the license, you can go ahead to the Salesforce platform pricing page and look for elastic services. In summary, it is $2,000 a month per 1 million invocations. But I don't sell, and I don't have any information about that. If you are already a customer, go ahead and contact your AE, and he will have, or they will have, more information about this. Okay. Minovar, what do you think about property management apps in Apex Salesforce? Do you want to write like this program? It is not my domain of expertise, so I don't have an opinion about that. So sorry about that, or sorry to disappoint. I don't have an opinion or an answer about this, Minovar. If anybody can jump in and have an opinion about this, please go ahead and participate. Deep. Yes, you need to buy only one Salesforce function license for this. Okay, Deep, thank you very much. Okay, we are reaching out to the end of the session, I guess. So the organizers, please let me show a last slide. Please connect with us, Salesforce developers. You can go to the developer.salesforce.com website to take a look at the different resources that we create and publish for you. Contact us at our Twitter account, Salesforce Devs, and also follow us on the other social networks. I recommend you to go and subscribe to the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel, where we publish a bunch of different videos. And don't forget, we have a bunch of different resources on Trailhead. There is a trail called Discover Salesforce Functions, where you can learn a little bit more about functions and the Functions Recipe Sample app. You have access to also a blog post I wrote a couple of weeks ago, how to get started with Salesforce Functions locally, no license required. Here, I teach you how to create a function to fetch stats from the YouTube API. So this is another good example for you to see how can you have callouts to external APIs. And here I explain you how to do it step by step. And there is also a very good episode about Salesforce Function on our developer podcast, where I interview Jonathan Jenkins, one of our architects working on the project. Well, he mentions all the experience working with functions and how our customers have used this. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for having me here. And any final words from you all?
Thank you very much, Julian. And probably let's select the best question for the day, based on your opinion. So the author of this question will get the voucher for the certification.
The best question. Oh my God, there is a bunch of different questions in here. So let me see.
Take your time.
I have two. I have two. That
So
are my favorite.
So let's probably select two winners.
Yes. So one is very related to the talk. It is by PB Molchanov. How do functions let us go beyond Salesforce limits? Because it's very relevant with the topic. And the other one is, and this is because of the Salesforce ecosystem and how applications in core works. It's how can we do the HTTP callouts? So I was able to also go ahead and show like a very great example. So those two questions from BP Molchanov and from Kuldeep, I think are very good and relevant for the topic.
Wow, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. So let me put my email account, michael.labanov@trailblazercgl.com. Feel free to drop me an email, and we will connect, and we'll send the vouchers to you, and you will have a chance to pass the certification. Hopefully that next time we'll have when we meet with Julian, Salesforce will have dedicated certification for functions.
Oh my God, and I know I will